We fought hard, and there were some mixed results. There weren't in some areas, like in Manchester and Liverpool, and even down in Bristol in the southwest of England, we did pretty well. And also in Wales, it wasn't as bad, but it was disappointing. Of course it was.
And who is to blame for this?
Well, I think we've got a period of time now in which I think we've not been able to get our policies across. Partly that's the media, I have to say, I have to be straight about that. But also our campaigning has also now, I think with a united party, our campaigning has got to step up a notch. So, the general election starts now. Local government elections are over, now it's the general election. In broadcasting terms, we get more balanced coverage in terms of a general election campaign. It gives us the opportunity to put our ideas across, and also it gives the opportunity to people to learn more about Jeremy Corbyn as our leader as well.
And you think the more they see him, the more they'll like him, because that is not the evidence so far.
Well, I think it's important in a general election, with a democracy like this, it's important you put your policies out there straightforwardly, but also you show what type of person you are. That's why I want this debate between Jeremy and Theresa May, and I don't understand why she's running from it. If we can have a debate in France between the two leaders for the presidency, that's standing today, why can't we here? And I think if they do see more of Jeremy, they'll see the honest and decent person that he is, but also the strength he has.
Shouldn't he do a debate with the other leaders in that case?
Well, we'll see. I think it's important that Theresa May...
So he might?
Well, let's see. I want Theresa May to respond to this, because the reality is, whoever's going to be Prime Minister of this country after June the 8th, it's either going to be Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May. It's going to be one of the two major parties. We need her to actually say, look, I will debate this. What is wrong with that? Why? We're a democracy, for goodness sake.
If you earn £80,000 or more a year, you'll be paying more in tax, but if you don't, you'll be paying no more.
But what we're saying today, anyone earning below £80,000, we'll be guaranteeing you will not have an increase in income tax or VAT or national insurance contributions. And for those above £80,000, we're asking them to pay a modest bit more. Why? To fund our public services. You had Theresa May on last week, Andrew. If I just make this point, you put that very good question to her about nurses. 11% cut in wages over the last 7 years. Some of them having to go to food banks. Our nurses, that cannot be right. So we're going to ask those higher earners just to pay a bit more.
Are we talking about a new rate of tax, because the 45p rate and then the 50p rate possibly under Labour?
What will happen over this next week is that the Labour Party, the Democratic Party, will be consolidating and confirming our manifesto. We'll launch it the week after next, and then we'll identify the very specifics of this. But I wanted people to...
But you've said very clearly that people over £80,000 a year will be paying more.
A bit more, a modest bit more. Well, let me say this. The reason I'm saying this, because I want middle and lower earners to be assured that under Labour they will not be paying more taxes. Because I've seen some of these ludicrous figures that the Tories have been bandying about, and I wanted them to have that assurance.
And for people earning £150,000, much richer off, is that still to return to the 50% tax band for them?
You'll see, I'm sorry to argue in this way or respond this way, but we have a democratic process in the Labour Party. This next week will determine that level, and then the following week the manifesto will be there. And what I'll be doing, just to be certain, I will be identifying for each policy the costing of that policy and the funding source.
How are you going to pay for it?
But the assurance I'm giving all the way through is that middle and lower earners will not have their taxes increased. And there'll be no stealth taxes either.
Can I ask you about the stealth taxes in that case? Because you haven't specifically ruled out a rise in employers' national insurance.
No, there's no plans to do that. I've never even mentioned that in the past.
The reason you didn't mention it was why people were suspicious.
OK, well, let me allay their suspicions. That isn't happening.
Not happening. And VAT, what about zero-rated items? Are you going to extend the rate of VAT over other areas? You said you won't raise the rate of VAT, but the extent of VAT.
We've no plans to do that. The only exception we made for that, if you remember, was we announced a couple of weeks ago this issue about private school fees, where we want to put VAT on that, and then we're going to use that to afford free school meals for all children. And I think that's fair.
One final tax question. We've got the Sunday Times rich list today. Very, very rich people indeed. Are you attracted at all by the idea of a wealth tax on the very richest?
Look, I'm quite shocked all the time about the inequalities within our society that we have. And somehow we've got to address that. And we'll be bringing forward ideas around that, both in terms of inequalities of wealth, but also inequalities of pay.
So wealth tax is possible?
No, we're talking about individual areas which will come forward. And every item of policy that we will be identified will cost, and then at the same time we'll identify the funding source. But we're talking about making sure our public services are properly funded. And it is about, we're not talking about hitting people hard. We're talking about modest increases so that we can actually have a society which we believe everyone shares the benefits of. The democratic decision-making about the future of our economy will be open and transparent, but will be inclusive. No longer will it be done by private lobbyists. It will be done by involving both sides of industry, and it will be involved in elected mayors, local democracy, local committees.
So a very, very clear, simple question. Are you a Marxist?
Right. I believe there's a lot to learn.
No or a yes? I couldn't work it out.
Well, I tell you, I believe there's a lot to learn from reading Capital. Yes, of course it is, because that's been recommended not just by me but many others, mainstream economists as well. But I also believe in the long tradition of the Labour Party, which involves people like G.D.H. Cole, Tawney and others. You put that all together and you have, I think, a direction for our economy based upon sound principles of fairness.
Now, looking at, you mentioned Das Kapital there, and the great prediction in Capital, which you have yourself raised, is that capitalism as a system will come down with an enormous crash. There will be a crisis and the entire system will fail. And you have said...
that's where Marx got it wrong, didn't it? That's where Marx got it wrong.
Because you yourself have said that you don't just simply want to replace the government, you want to bring down the system.
I want to transform.
Do you still want to bring down the system?
I want to transform the system. That's where Marx got it wrong. We know that.
So you don't want to destroy the capitalist system?
I want to transform the system. I'll tell you how I want to transform it. I want to transform it in a way in which we have a prosperous economy, but where that prosperity is shared by all, where it's economically sustainable, but environmentally sustainable as well.
So you're no longer looking for a revolutionary moment?
I'm looking for a transformative government, and which will, like the Attlee government, which transformed our society, will lay the foundations for a prosperous economy, where our country is richer, but where everybody shares in those riches.
Now,